Um, Welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's always so good to have the enthusiasm to see how to grow our networks and the social solidarity economy cause, and so that more and more people can enjoy the benefits of a more fair and just society. Today's topic is on food sovereignty and agroecology. We have a very an excellent resource person joining us today. I'll read her bio data in a minute, but let me give you just a brief introduction of this topic for today. Food security policies in the 70s were to promote mass industrial scale processed food. There was this issue of hunger and famine, and so governments drew up policies to that were largely food security in nature. But this resulted in mass production of cheap but non-nutritious food. And secondly, it left big greedy corporations to benefit from the profit making from this mass production, but small producers were being left behind as these policies favored the big corporations. This food security policy, and together with the neoliberal economies and maximization of profit, as it was building up in the 70s and 80s, also promoted large-scale chemical-based farming. And this resulted in a deepening of the climate change, where large-scale and industrial farming itself contributes between 25 to 40% of greenhouse gases. Two, not only did this food security policy deepen climate change, it also resulted in degradation of soil and reduction in productive farming land as chemicals were used and made the soil non-productive. And thirdly, it began to put more toxic chemicals and disease-inducing food to the public and to the consumer. So in summary, what has happened with the food security policies that started in the 70s began to disconnect producers and consumers. Food production was dominated by the greedy big corporations, and the small producers were being left behind, sometimes through land grabbing, control of the supply chain by the powerful, subsidies and policy making were made largely in favor of the large farms and monocrop farming in particular. And so this left the consumers and the producers being disconnected from each other. And at the same time, the consumers were being pushed into buying non-safe food, and especially the poor were the greatest, or the low income were the greatest victim in these policies. So to move forward, we need to access safe food production practices that conserve the environment, and a social solidarity economy, or a fair economic system that puts people and planet back into the center of development. And so the question is, how do we move forward on this? So with that introduction, may I have the pleasure of introducing Judith Hitchman, who is with us today. Judith is Irish and has 45 years of international experience in interpersonal communication, training, and participatory management. She specializes in managing cultural differences within international networks of sustainable local development, as well as global processes. In recent years, she has focused on working as a food sovereign activist and is currently president of Urgency, the global community-supported agriculture network, a social movement that now represents approximately 3 million people. She has held the mandate as consumer constituency representative in the civil society mechanism of the United Nations Committee for World Food Security and Nutrition, where she was the designated moderator and negotiator on the policy on food loss and waste in 2014. She also represents Urgency as a board member and coordinator of the Intercontinental Social and Solidarity Economy Network, RIPES. Her contributions focus on promoting how food sovereignty and solidarity economy can provide a genuine rights-based alternative to the existing economic paradigm. The core aspects of her recent work have focused on global food policy, especially throughout the United Nations system, and building bridges between food sovereignty, solidarity economy, and agroecology, the key pillars of Urgency's work. Wow, so we're so happy to have Judith join us on this. And now, I have a double role to play, both as a moderator as well as a resource person. My name is Kon On Sin. Mr. Kon is the Managing Director of the Foundation for Community Studies and Development. His work focuses on poverty alleviation and community development programs, in particular among the Orang Asli and the urban poor. Mr. Kon also sits on the UNDP Orang Asli Microgrant National Steering Committee. He's also a Malaysian representative of RIPES, or the Intercontinental Network for the Promotion of Social Solidarity Economy. And lastly, he's also a member of the CSO SDG Alliance, a civil partnership with the Economic Planning Unit of Malaysia. And so with all the introductions done, I would now like to ask if Judith can tell us about what she does and why she does it. And before that, can I just set out the outline for today's session? We will start off with each of the resource persons telling you what they do and why they do it. And then secondly, we will move to a set of questions. After each question, the resource persons will give their answers. And then we'll be open to the floor for about 20 minutes of comments and questions and discussion, followed with a second question to the resource persons, followed with another 20 minutes of discussion, until we can hopefully we'll be able to address 3 major questions and then come up with a conclusion for ASEAN. We would like to feed these proposals that we discuss in this roundtable discussion into the ASEAN forum and make policy recommendations. So with that, Judith, can I, oh yes, and one more thing, please keep your comments and questions to within 5 minutes so that everyone will have a chance to bring in their ideas and thoughts. Okay, with that, may I please invite Judith to share with us what you do and what and why you do it.
That's a huge question. Thanks everybody for inviting me. I really feel extremely honored to be participating in this discussion this morning. Well, it's my morning, it's your afternoon. I think I'm going to turn it around and tell you why I do things before I tell you what I do. I've been an activist of one sort or another throughout my life, ever since I was a teenager. And today I'm a grandmother with 5 grandchildren, 2 of whom are already at college, so university age. And I look out my window at the beautiful world we have, and I turn on my radio and I listen to the incredible levels of suffering and destruction of our planet. So why I do things really is for my grandchildren, for other people's children and grandchildren that I know and love around the world, and those that I don't know. I do it out of a sense of having been part of probably the most privileged generation the world has ever known, and looking at the destruction to come. So using tools like the SDG, which have huge flaws, but which we as people's movements, as social movements, can use to push for policy to repair our planet and to build social rights. Our social rights around the globe are also severely under threat, be it the rights of indigenous peoples, the rights of women, the rights of youth. And all of our different human rights are severely under threat. Now, I have been involved in food sovereignty and working on the right to food for a long time now. Because it seems to me that if you do not have enough food to eat, that you cease to exist. It's one of the really fundamental rights, food and water. And my path has led me, perhaps in the 1990s already, I started working on social and solidarity economy and on food sovereignty issues. So what I do, I never work alone. I am a global leader of Urgency, which is the local solidarity partnerships between producers and consumers, specifically community-supported agriculture, but much broader, working on community-supported fisheries as well now, and partnerships that reach beyond just CSA, because there's such a huge diversity possible and needed in the world in terms of direct producer-consumer food relationships. Because what people may not be aware of is that it is the same mega corporations that control the land, that control the seeds, that control the water, that control food production, that control the sale of the food to the supermarkets, and that capture the entire world's population in a very exploitative paradigm. Exploitative in terms of the patents to seeds, exploitative in terms of the way the land is worked and depleted of all its vital energies, and exploitative in terms of the kind of food to which people have access. The channels that we use are building from local groups up, but the local is always networked at national level. The national is always networked at international. And at international, we are networked with all the other food sovereignty movements around the world. So if you like to, I can go into this a little bit more deeply, perhaps, but maybe you want me to take a break there.
Yes, Judith, amazing introduction. It's opened so many ideas and directions in which we can go. We'd love to hear a bit more on that and how you're going to develop that further. But maybe for now, that is a great start before we move into our questions. Judith, I have to do my spiel as well, unfortunate, but I'll do it in 5 minutes. And then we can move on to the big questions and develop some of these ideas you talk about. How do we deal with these big issues that you're referring to? Okay, Judith is obviously a person that works at a global level and looking at the big macro issues, which are really helpful. My experience is more largely with small grassroots communities. And so my story is about the Orang Asli. They are the indigenous people of Peninsula Malaysia. They are forest dwellers. It starts with a tragic story of the Orang Asli who once had sustainable livelihoods and a forest rich in natural resources that met all their needs. It was their source for food, source of their medicine and pharmacy, and a source even of all their total life savings, and a place of learning, school, and their adventures and romance. But with modernization, logging and development of their lands for monocrops and mining have destroyed their livelihoods. They have been made poor overnight and have become victims of profit-centered development, profit before people, if I may add. And now they have desperately to adapt to this new world and this new normal. And it's with this backdrop that the organization, the Foundation for Community Studies that I work with, had to journey with this Orang Asli to navigate this depressing and bleak path. But the story doesn't end there. It's a story of courage, trust, and determination. They had no exposure to commercial, market-driven agriculture. They had limited exposure and experience to the market economy. And together with the Orang Asli, we started with 8 Orang Asli. We started an organic farm. We brought in some seed capital, brought in people to train them to do organic farming. And because that gave them a better value for their efforts. And then took that journey to coach them from market-driven production, commercial production, to business management, organizational capacity, and finally to accessing fair markets. And finally, with the greatest challenge, of course, that was then was to help them access the fair markets. And so with the community farm enterprise, we were finally able to partner with premium supermarkets in the supply chain to ensure that they enjoy these fair prices. Today, the farm has grown from 8 to 40 over farmers. Incomes have doubled and tripled for some. More are joining, and we're replicating in the second village. And so this is very quickly what I do. And why I do it is essentially, I think it was just seeing the sheer injustice that you had people who had so much and people who had so little. And how could we live in a world to see that disparity? And having had come from a slightly privileged background, and I did not have to struggle with poverty, and seeing that I had giftings. I was trained as a lawyer, and in the process of fighting for them, in promoting and creating awareness of rights for the Orang Asli, I discovered a deeper layer of injustice that needed to be dealt with. And it was just, instead of going to the courts where it'll take forever, and many of them will never be able to reach that, there was just the desperate need to put bread and butter on the table for the families. And so we then I felt there was another more important layer of work that needed to be done, and that was to address the socio-economic differences. And then in the whole process, discovered with Ben and his band of colleagues and friends, that there was a need to question the way economics has been done, of a very profit before people type of business models, and how we need to address that. And so any legal action, any other welfare approaches did not go far enough to address these issues, these deep rooted issues. And so very privileged to come on board this SSE platform to try and find solutions and to shape business models that will help the poor and give them a better chance and build a better society. Right. Okay, so that is my 5 minutes. Hopefully I did it in 5 minutes, Judith. Now, Judith, I have to bring the big questions back to you now. It'd be great to develop some of these thoughts, these broad sweeping notions that you've given us at the rich and powerful control land, sea, and seeds, and markets. And therefore, there's a need for society and the small people, as it were, to find ways to work together. So let me just, for those who have just joined in, and the question that we want to address in this topic today, in this roundtable discussion, is with the food security policies and the profit before people type of economics and business models, it has caused a disconnect between producers, small producers in particular, with the consumers. Producers are being left behind because of all this land grabbing, protection of seed rights, control of markets. So the producers are not able to compete, they're being left out. And yet the consumers are also suffering because of this mass-produced cheap food. The consumers are not getting safe food. So how do we ensure small producers and consumers are not left behind in light of these three major challenges? And they are, one, mass industrial cheap food production through the food security policies. Two, large-scale monocrops and chemical-based farming that are sidelining and leaving the small producers further behind through land grabbing and so forth. And thirdly, an economic system that is biased towards large corporations, particularly those that are profit before people centered. And so we come to this question for Judith: how do we ensure small producers gain back control of their livelihoods and consumers are able to access safe food?
That's a really big one. I mean, that is the root question that we're all working on. First of all, it's really essential to say that 80%, between 70 and 80% of our food is produced by small-scale food producers. Historically, these are the people who have fed us and who have fed us nutritious food. Because of the corporate takeover of land and of food chains, global food chains, we have a system where over-processed food is being sold in the supermarkets. It's being sold cheaply on the basis of slave labor. And really slave labor, not just the producers who work under contract, but the agricultural and food chain workers who, even in Europe, which is considered by many as developed, are working as daily waged workers on subsistence wages and with no social protection. If you go into a supermarket in most countries in the world, I think in any country virtually, food is cheap. Food does not reflect the real cost of food because the real cost is being outsourced. It is the agricultural workers, the migrant workers who are the food chain workers who are bearing the cost. It is the small-scale food producers who are bearing the cost because they are being paid an amount that does not even allow them to live, and they go out of business in increasing numbers. Also, all around the world, small-scale food producers' ages are high. So the way we need to work on this is really as joined up social movements. The biggest movement is the Via Campesina, which is the small-scale farmers union around the world. It is about 260 million people in the different countries. But they do not work alone. They work together with the pastoralists, with the fishers, with the consumers, women, youth, and together we do have a considerable impact. The impact obviously gets, the more our impact is real, the more the pushback from the corporations and the private sector is real. The real cost of food is an essential part of what we need to work on. The other is awareness raising on the fact that we need to distinguish caloric intake from nutrition. When people are poor, they are being pushed into a system today where they buy overprocessed cheap foods and Coca-Cola. They get their 2,000 or whatever calories at very low cost, but they don't get adequate nutrition. People like those you described when you introduced yourself are used to eating essentially local food that is very high in nutrition because it is fresh. They pick it, they eat it, or they hunt it and eat it. And these traditional foods are an essential part of making the world a healthier place. I mean, if you look at the United Nations figures, every year the FAO publishes a report called SOFI, which is the State of Food and Security in the World. Currently, 11% of the world's population, 820 million people, are undernourished. You also have about 650 million people who are overnourished, who are suffering from non-communicable diseases because they're obese, I mean, heart issues, diabetes, and so on. And the current global COVID crisis is going to push at least 150 million people into extreme poverty through job losses. We're heading into a very, very severe economic crisis, which is an opportunity for social and solidarity economy to really build a sustainable food system and a sustainable economic system in terms of local economic development again. So to answer this in a nutshell, people in developed countries need to understand that food has got to be based on food sovereignty, the right of people to adequate food and nutrition of their choice, and not be obliged to buy into the supermarket food that is poor in nutrition and that is going to make them ill rather than healthy, but that is also going to make a lot of people poorer along the way. And the logic, if you like, of local solidarity partnerships between producers and consumers is to build the direct access for all to these healthy foods. Now, people like you have a huge role to play. People like myself has a certain role to play. But local authorities also have a very important role to play in terms of governing how land is used at local level and how they support those who are socially marginalized to have access to this healthy food that is territorial food system produced.
Fantastic. Thank you, Judith. That was some very, very insightful comments on creating, we need to create awareness to bring more groups together, creating the need to create direct access through CSOs or other communities working together, and finally with state intervention. Judith, my other issue that I feel a bit inadequate to share on the macro issues because my exposure has largely been at a micro level. But I tell you what I find the most challenging. The most challenging is not about getting in the appropriate technology or the farming techniques or finding the produce. The greatest challenge, as I look at it, is that people don't want to change. People are happy as they are until they hit a wall as it is. And so this awareness, while some are aware, it hasn't moved to a critical level where we can bring about quicker changes simply because if the people are prepared to work together more quickly. So for example, with the Orang Aslis that I work with, we started with 8 farmers, and it's taken us almost 5 years to grow to 40 plus farmers. So we're gaining the critical masses now to make that big jump. But it's taken 5 years to create awareness, to see that if they work together, they can make a change. The first 2 years, we had ups and downs. People came in, people came out. The level of cooperation, there was a very low level of a deep sense of helplessness and hopelessness. They could not help themselves. And so people were just doing as little as they could, taking as little risk as they can. They did not appreciate until they have an economy of scale, they have enough, they will never be able to get the economy of scale to be sustainable and to be profitable. But to move it to that level, you need a lot of awareness, a lot of people who then rise up to the occasion, understand it, and take it on. So my challenge actually at the grassroots level is that of how do we motivate change? And creating awareness is one, but it takes time. And then secondly, you need good leaders that are visionary, leaders of integrity. And so, that takes time to build and to equip. And not all of them, when they come from such conditions, are able to understand the multi-layered challenges of globalization. Where are the forces of change coming from? Who are behind the logging and the mining? What are the economic systems? So all that takes time to build and understand, and to see that at the end of the day, if they do not do anything, they will end up further and further down the pecking order. And so that is where maybe we can take it along further along that lines. How do we? So yes, Judith, I agree. We need to create more awareness. We need to build more numbers and to say these are the things that are good for everyone, and to build that solidarity. But how do we move that paradigm of awareness and change? So that comes to our second question.
I'd just like to respond to that, if I may.
Yes.
Because I think we have 2 factors that are forcing our hand in terms of change right now. One is COVID-19, and the other is climate change. And in terms of COVID-19, in China, in the initial stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw between 300% and 400% increase in demand for community-supported agriculture. People who had never bought into the notion of a box scheme in the urban areas, including urban poor, suddenly realized they didn't have access to food and didn't have access to safe, healthy food. So the crisis created the demand, and while it may have fallen a little bit from that initial 300% or 400% increase, that we're estimating at this stage that there's probably a global increase in demand for local agroecologically grown food of up to 50%. And a lot of that is taking it out of the supermarkets that are being seen as places of contamination and taking it into direct procurement from farmers at local markets through contractualized or non-contractualized box schemes of different kinds. So that is the one thing. The other change factor is climate change, and people are really, really seeing huge devastation in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, everywhere from climate change. So they're having to rethink, their whole processes, both in terms of growing and producing their food. And I think that there is something of a quantum leap going on. To me, the question is it social and solidarity economy that is going to come out on top with genuine innovation that is people's innovation and people's systems? Or is it going to be the artificial intelligence, data grabbing of the corporate sector?
Yes, wonderful. Okay, now this point, can I open it up to the group? And any questions or comments to ask? We'll have 20 minutes on this and then move on to the next question.
Hi, hello, Onsen.
Hi, Dr. Yusuf.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, very interesting. I would like to ask Judith, actually, from her deliberation, actually they're still controlled by the large producer, big giant corporation, thing like that. And the question is now that how do we break that, so that we can increase the share, the market share, if you like, the food that produced by the small producer, like the one doing under SSE. That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf.
Yep.
Judith, over to you, please.
Okay. Well, I don't know where you live, and I don't know.
I'm from Malaysia, yeah.
And I don't know how developed your traditional market system is still in Malaysia. I'm not familiar with that, unfortunately. I would love to be. How many people go to their local wet markets, their street markets, to buy their food? You see, the supermarkets are very comfortable and very easy. It's a one-stop shop. And young people who are working, particularly if both of the couple are working, it's very easy to take your trolley and your car and go to the supermarket. You don't waste time. But the contact is lost, both with the producer and with the food in the process. Perhaps one of the answers is to hold events, inviting people to come and meet producers. If you know and can put a face on the person who is producing your food, you look on the food differently. If the food producer invites you to her farm or his farm, and you see how the food is grown, and you understand that there are no chemicals being used, that it is being grown agroecologically, and that it will be healthy for you, there's a different motivation, particularly if the couple has children. I think the biggest motivators are couples want their children to be fed healthily, and people who have health concerns want to eat healthily. And if they are introduced to the producers, and if they then realize that actually, if they're buying direct, that it isn't going to cost them more, but that the producer is going to make more and they are going to get healthier, more nutritious food, I think that Local authorities, again, can help to promote it, but they're not essential to this. But open days and newsletters, and if you can manage to get some airtime on radio or on television to promote these exciting things that are happening locally. And very often, the local producers are at the local markets. If you still have those local markets, and that is where people can pick up their food then. But it is a subscription to their weekly box. And it also builds something that is essential to social and solidarity economy, which is the community and the solidarity in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judith. And any other questions and or comments from the floor?
May I contribute to the discussion?
Yes, please.
Hi, Judith, I am from the Philippines. And what you are suggesting is not a new thing anymore in the Philippines. You have started it already.
I know.
And right now we are training farmers actually on how to do it, replacing totally the pesticides and the fertilizers, the chemical-based ones, with their own concoctions that they can produce in their backyards using indigenous materials that are ultra low cost. Okay, and this is very easy to learn and to do.
Yeah.
And in a matter of months, they are already self-sufficient, and in another year, they are able to sell to the market already. There is now a grassroots movement. It's a grassroots movement, mind you. They are not organized farmers at all, but we are organizing the seminars to train these farmers how to do it. And those we train the rest of the community. So it's growing up as a movement to encourage organic farming. And we, from our end, we live in the metro, we live in Metro Manila. We are now organizing the consumers, bringing the farm closer to the tables. So we are now in the process of registering a social enterprise to make it all happen, to tie this up, the farmers as well as the distributors and as well as the end market, the consumers. And it became very necessary, and it was, like I said, it's a social enterprise born of the COVID-19 adversity. Now it can be done. We can disrupt the present supply chain system that instead of people going to the supermarket and instead of these big businesses and these lenders, these investors who the farmers run to for their farm inputs, you can totally shut them down and just produce organically grown food, link them up to the market, even have them certified organically so that you can command a better price for them. It can be done, and it doesn't have to be so organized in a way. Like I was saying at the very start of this forum, I was saying we can already be functioning without the formal organization, without the form yet, and then we can just go into that later when we see that, hey, so many farms have already sprung up and so many distribution centers in the metro have already come out, started developing informally, you know, without these formal organizations.
Lynn, can you explain a little bit of where have you created the markets for your small farmers?
Started when we were locked down.
Okay. Where did you have these markets? Where did you develop the market?
Well, honestly, I didn't know it will turn out this way. I started it on my own initiative. The farmers came to me asking for help if I can help market their produce. And what I did is just, write a narrative of the farmers, write a story, put it on Viber groups, put it on my professional groups, put it on Christian organization groups, international and locally. But so many responded and said, Lynn, we will resell your produce. And so what I did was I became the distribution hub.
Right.
And this,
Okay.
and this, and we're distributing to posh villages in Metro Manila as far as Ayala, Alabang,
Wow.
and
Amazing.
Makati, Forbes Park in Makati, and the Green Hills subdivisions and the Green Meadows subdivisions. I got resellers there. I was able to mobilize them informally, but they run with me and the mission to help the farmers produce, go to the market, not the supermarkets, not the export market, but the local markets. And so we were able to, demand a better price for the farmers' produce, and at the same time control the price at the table of the consumers.
Right.
We shortened, in fact,
Okay.
the supply chain. And
Yeah.
if we were able, and we're moving
Yeah.
tons every day, we're moving
Okay.
tons of fruits every day.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, maybe we will let Judith comment on this strategy that you have created.
Well, I hear a lot of really positive things in that strategy, Lynn. Thank you very much. I mean, what I'm hearing in what you're saying is that you have been training people in agroecological inputs.
Yes.
You're also probably working with participatory guarantee system certification, because there are two kinds of certification. One is the export-oriented, very expensive certification, and the other is the PGS, the participatory guarantee systems, that really is very low cost and affordable to small-scale food producers. But basically, you're bringing the people who grow the food and the people who eat the food together in a sustainable way into a sustainable food system at territorial level, which is what we are really trying to do. Now, the solidarity economy aspects are increasing the security of the livelihoods for the small scale food producers and guaranteeing that people have access to affordable food. Now, there's perhaps one thing that can be done that really could increase the solidarity economy aspect, which would be if some people who have slightly better means could afford to pay a little more, so that you could subsidize some shares for those people who have much less. Because, we're still living in a society that is a very unequal society. There are lots of different mechanisms that we have developed in urgency for social inclusion to make the shares more affordable for socially excluded communities or individuals. And that is perhaps some next steps that you could think about. And we'd be happy to help you with that, because basically it is the COVID situation, as I said, that forced your hand into thinking about it. So the crisis situation is producing some amazing results in terms of sustainable local food systems and real food sovereignty. And that's great. And linking it to social solidarity economy is the way to go. Well done.
Thank you.
We got one last question before we move on to any comments and before we move on to the next question.
Can I share? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Gloria, please ask
Yes.
your
Yes,
question.
I just want to share. It's like which one? The one is from the awareness, the good leaders, like that. We have a program, the integrated community food production, which the community for the relocation site. The one where telling is the changing of mindset of the people. And choosing good leaders to continue the program. Why should I want to share the concept of the integrated community food production? We organized the relocatees from the danger zone to resettled in a resettlement site. At the start, they don't want to go there. But within the length of months with the social preparation, they accepted the government project, and now they live there. They live, but before they go there, we, with the local government, we introduced the different programs, and the integrated community food production was one. 300 beneficiaries was identified, and leaders was identified also. From that, 30 leaders, community leaders, we put with the national government and the local government, they put up the community garden where they run now for almost 3 years, which they produce vegetables, poultry products, mushrooms, like the one we are talking now with the food from the garden, the people initiative, the community initiative, the harvest that they every day they harvested vegetables and poultry products. Half of the earnings were for their savings and mobilizations, expenses like that, and the other part was benefits given to the members. And the food was the vegetables are ready from the garden, and it was what this one sell and low price. And also the objective of the project was to have a food ready on the table. That was we are having 2 relocation sites doing that program here in our city, in our local government in Valenzuela.
Right. Thank you, Gloria. And Judith, you want to come back on that?
Resettling and relocating people is never easy.
Yes, ma'am.
And it should always really be a last resort. Last year, I was working in Jakarta, and the fishers, the local small-scale fishers and mussel farmers were under threat of being completely relocated from their traditional fishing grounds because high-rise buildings for the rich were being built into the sea. And there's a huge movement of resistance in the KWTP, I think it's the name of the group. So the first thing we need to ask is, do people really need to be relocated?
Yes.
Whose interests are being served by a relocation?
Mm-hmm.
In your case, I think you have really provided a very positive livelihood for relocated people.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think it sounds like you're doing really excellent work. But the question, the deeper question behind the very positive story that you have told is that because of climate change and because of wars all over the world, we have increased migrant communities, we have increased displaced people, and we need to work so that these people are not put into camps that are detention camps, but that we need to provide them with decent livelihoods, decent housing, and access to either growing or accessing healthy, nutritious food.
Can I answer, ma'am?
Please, because I don't have the whole backstory there.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Laura, can you mention where this location is? This site is. There's some questions.
Oh, we are living here in Valenzuela City in Metro Manila, part of Metro Manila, northern part. The local government program was inside in-city relocation.
Okay.
People from the living in the danger zone areas like the riverbanks, along the creek, along the under the national grid or the electric wires, National Power Corporation. Then the program was concepted because every typhoon, when there is yes, ma'am, when every disaster is coming, especially flooding, the local government think what was the best thing to do to remove or relocate the people living with that danger side. Then discussions was have a lot to do. Then the people was convinced to relocate from that side because it was a big problem from to the local government. Every time there is a typhoon, every time there is the people living there have a lot of problem: electricity, water, every the needs was they asked solutions from the local government officials, so that they came up with that program, the relocation site. So the people now, we have the first one was the second. We have 3 relocation sites, in-city relocation site, but the biggest one is the second one, which was 11 hectares with 3,000 families to be relocated there, with a medium-rise building, a 3-story building, where the families will live for 25 years of living there, with every year of assessment if they follow the policies where they are when they are still living in that relocation site. But the government programs was put it there: schools, hospitals, churches, markets where they can buy, or where they can do selling some stuffs also was there. And the one that I'm telling was the project, community garden, the integrated community food production, is one of the how can I describe this one? Because I'm telling to our government officials, because I'm also one of the initiated with the program, and every time when other local
Gloria,
government
sorry,
from other
I may have to
provinces.
interrupt you. Can you finish your comment in 1 minute? So that others can have a chance to put in their questions and comments.
Yeah. It's I just want only to tell that changing the mindset of people is not easy. Choosing good leaders is not also easy. It's a process. And with that process, the local government, the national government, public or private institutions can help to develop good communities, good programs, so we can help those people who are in need.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Gloria, for expanding on that. And
Thank you.
May I comment on Gloria's and then ask some questions?
Yes,
I am a resettlement specialist. I work with the World Bank, ADB, JICA to resettle, families that are affected by projects that are funded by these institutions. And usually under the Philippine regulatory system, the resettlement program is to be undertaken by the LGUs. That's why it's
yes, ma'am.
Valenzuela. So as I understand, in Valenzuela, there is a big flood control project undertaken by the PWH, and that is probably why those who are in the steros, along river banks, because they are in the flood areas, in the flood prone areas, and so they have to be resettled and taking advantage of that flood control project, which is funded by the probably JICA, that's a flood control project. Then I would assume that they are beneficiaries of these resettlement programs. I'm just, it is good that the LGU can have an in-city resettlement, because most of the problems in Metro Manila for resettlement is the absence of affordable land where this can be resettled within the city. So most of the time they are resettled elsewhere.
Yes, ma'am.
And most of the time the problem is the livelihood, because the workers, the opportunities are wherever they are located nearby. And when you resettle them elsewhere, like further away from their sources of income, that's when the problem happens. And most of the time LGUs are not prepared with the right kind of livelihood activity that should address the economic displacement of these resettlers. So I'm very interested, Gloria, because we can work together by teaching them the right way of producing food for themselves, and eventually for putting it in the market, the right kind of food, which is healthy food, which can command a better price than the traditional or the usual gardening style. Because we want them to earn more. Just gardening is not enough for them to make a living.
Yes, ma'am.
If they are displaced, you displace a lot of not only the economic opportunities, but also their social, their social support system. So it's very complicated to undertake resettlement.
Thank you, ma'am.
thank you for that intervention, Gloria. Yes, settlement is very, very complex issues. and livelihoods that are abundant in the city get lost when you get them
sir.
outside. So it's and whether
Action, Gloria, do they have to pay for their settlement sites, or are these given to them free by the LGU?
They are asked for 300 pesos per month for their para dun sa room, ma'am, sa room. Yung
so it's a rental property.
Yes, ma'am.
Government rental instead of the house that they will buy from the government.
Yes, ma'am. It's it's a medium rise building, 1, 2, 3, three-story building.
RB, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you for that very interesting intervention. May I move on to the next question? And again, to Judith, what are the best models or strategies that you have seen that are able to, that are working well in bringing about better food sovereignty and protection for safe food for the consumer? Can you share some of your global experience?
Okay, I think the starting point is really the slogan we have as social movements, which is nothing about us without us. It has to be bottom up. Any strategy that is just top down cannot work. I think the examples that Lynn and Gloria have given really speak to that. I think Gloria is talking about community gardens, which is really bottom-up people feeding themselves. Lynn is talking about the overall community response in a joined-up way. So that really is part of the core and the essence of where it has to start. We can only build from the grassroots up. We can only build with people who want to do so. I'll give you an example of something that is ongoing at the moment in Europe that may also speak to you. There are huge, great big industrial trawlers. There was a 50-meter trawler that was recently launched in France. All the small scale fisher people have got together to say no. And they are building a totally new response of selling direct to consumers in their many, many localities. Now that does not get rid of the fact that the industrial trawlers are hoovering up all their resources. So we need to have a much wider fight against the exploitation of the resources by the industrial system. So on one hand, the evidence-based model that at local level, sustainable local food systems can really feed people and continue to feed people and feed people healthily and nutritious food. And a lot of that can be done under the radar. You don't always need a lot of outside funding to work on that. But at a certain moment, you have to confront the system. And that requires people coming together in movements, such as ASEC, such as RIPES, such as your local, national movements, because we can only feed the world sustainably for so long if the system destroys our natural resources, and if climate change destroys our natural resources. So, you know, there's the local to national to international at all times.
Okay, thank you. Very deep and provoking, Judith. So it's really and deep down you're saying that people need to get together, they need to build their social movements, gather momentum, and begin to challenge and question the system that is slowly but surely destroying our food sources and compromising our health. I'll open up to the floor at this point. Maybe would some of you like to share also of your experiences and models that are working well that in your community or your groups? ASCII, I think, is anyone from ASCII? Would they like to share some of your experience, since you do a lot of work with food production as well?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. What we're doing is like a value chain program. So we help the farmers to, from planting up until to harvesting, up until to linkages to the market, because our one of our major problems is the middleman, because they impose the price to the farmers. Some of them are providing loans already to the farmers, so the farmers are tied, their hands are tied, and they cannot just sell their produce to other buyers, but just to that particular middleman. So what we did is we tie up with um, different different organizations or institutions like the San Miguel Corporation for the cassava farmers. So the San Miguel Corporation provided some technical assistance. They provided initially they provided some of the stocks for the cassava, and then we supported the farmers for our microfinance company provided microloans to these farmers in in terms of land preparation, providing fertilizers, and then the technical assistance is coming from the San Miguel. And after that, our we have a cooperative. We call that ASKI Multi-Purpose Cooperative, who served as the consolidator of all the produce. So all the farmers are bringing their produce to the multi-purpose cooperative, and then the multi-purpose cooperative directly sent these products to San Miguel Corporation. So that's it. It's an integration of. We also tried to network with the local government agriculture, because if you have a good collaboration and networking with the LGU, and if they see that this particular project will really help the farmers, then getting their buy-in to support the project is it's a lot easier. So sometimes they provide their technician to go to the field to assist us, like when we provided some goat livelihood to the farmers of somewhere in Nueva Ecija, up north of Nueva Ecija. Then they provided their their veterinaries to check on the goats, how they were doing, and to educate the goat raisers on what to do, and the things that they have to ensure in order for them to grow well their goats. And so that's it. It's a collaboration between local government, private institutions, and providing access to financial products like microloans. Is I think that is one of the strategy that the model that we think could best work.
Sounds like an excellent model. You know, can you share what is the impact? I mean, it sounds like an amazing model. You've been able to integrate farmers, producers to market, supply chain, and also creating partnerships with the local authorities and private partnerships, private sector partnerships. So that's an amazing model. You've integrated a whole supply chain with all the stakeholders. How far has it gone, and how scalable has this arrangement been to other parts?
Right now, the impact is, it sometimes it. I mean, what it did for the farmers is, having a stable price of their produce. So no matter what season it is, the price of the good will still be bought on the same price. So we already have that agreement, and that most of them were able to, were able to expand their businesses, aside from working in the rice field, because most of our beneficiaries before are just a paid workers in the farm. Right. But now they are able to to invest on their own businesses, and able to, they were able to provide food for stable. Somehow it's stable, but it's still there's still struggle because of the pandemic. But right now we are doing a lot of networking with someone who could provide grants to stimulate the livelihood that was that were affected by the pandemic. Because but right now, so what we did is we partner with Bureau of Plant and Industry. We call that, we have a project called Gulayan ng ASEAN, vegetables of ASEAN. ASEAN means you are a member of ASCII. So we provided them vegetable seeds. So just to stabilize the need for their food for the table, and if they have the excess, then they could also sell it. But right now we are working with, like I said earlier, we are working with private stakeholders who could like what we did for the root crops of the Aitas in Porac, Pampanga. So we were able to meet someone here also in ASEC, and then right now we are already doing the transaction. So right now we already processed 2 tons of root crops and already sold them.
Wonderful. Froilan, can you give us an idea of how many producers are involved in your network?
I'm sorry.
Can you give us an idea of how many people are benefiting from your network and integrated into your supply chain?
Yeah, right now I think we have 200, including the previous projects that we have from Kasaba, maybe around 200 farmers.
Right. And how long have you been doing this?
Since 2013, I think we're starting this kind of program.
What, 7 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also right now we are also looking forward to help those ginger farmers, because I think there is a need for ginger. We talked to someone who will also be needing some ginger products. So we're still currently working it out, and we hope that this will come into fruit, so we could help the ginger farmers as well. So it's part of, like the model that I said, it's from planting, from land preparation up until to harvest time.
Sounds amazing, Froilan.
And how we market the products. It's very important.
Yeah, Froilan, I'm just curious. It's amazing that you've even been able to get state agency or local authority to partner, including the private sector. Do you see this scaling up in a big way since you've been able to? I mean, one of the greatest challenges I find at working with left behind and marginalized communities is, how do you get the state agencies to work with them, understand them, and customize their programs that are in line with what the people want, and giving them a fair price?
Well, what we are doing is we regularly visit the local officials and we present some of our accomplishments. So these are the people that we are able to help in your from your municipality or provincial, and we provide them regular reports. So we also work on the accreditation, because in an LGU, if you are an accredited non-government organization, if you are being recognized as one of the official non-government organization, it would be easier for you to access some of their services in terms of health, in terms of agriculture, and in terms of providing some technical assistance to your clientele.
Right.
So it's a relationship that it cannot be done in just few meetings. It's a long process, getting trust of each other, the confidence and trust of everyone, and setting the goal of there's sharing the same vision of helping those marginalized sectors of their communities.
Thank you. Thank you, Fraulein. All right. Can I open up to other members of the floor to ask any questions or comments?
Sure. Go ahead.
Oh, there's a question from Rosalinda. Rosalinda, do you want to ask your question to Aski?
Yeah, what are the implications of having as final buyer farmers produce a huge corporations, which is assumed to get the largest share of the returns? Well, the fact is they are helping the farmers, and they are they're providing a competitive price compared to the market, and it eliminates the middlemen, who are really, because if we have a middleman, they are the only ones who are getting really they're getting a lot of the returns. But one of the challenge, actually, if you are partnering with huge corporation, is the standard that they're setting, the volume that you need to produce, and because one of our problems are before is the post-harvest facilities. So that's one of the major problem that we encountered. So because we don't have any storage, we don't have any solar dryer to dry the produce. So that's really need a lot of promotion to the local stakeholders to address those kind of challenges. And what the good thing about it, because like the price of the cassava, sometimes it drops to very, very low price. But if you have an agreement with in an institution who will regularly buys the product, you are assured of the price, and you will not worry that even if it's off season, it will still be it will still be bought in a just price.
Thank you, Frolio. All right, let's move on to other questions. And
maybe I could just make one or two comments there on that.
Yes, please, Judith. Yes, please.
Now, I really think that contract farming, as you say, is one of the worst things that exist, because it really is one of the ways that kills small-scale food producers. But the whole system that you're showing, okay, you've cut out the middleman, which brings very definite benefits. But I am not sure that you're changing the underlying system, which is the neoliberal system. If you look very carefully and listening to you, you are still working within the corporate sector. And don't forget that corporations are desperately looking to greenwash their work. They are making concessions to people like you, and obviously that benefits the community. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change the underlying system. Even if you have created a cooperative that is the sort of lead organization, so presumably at your level, the wealth is being shared. Once it leaves your cooperative, it is still going into the mainstream system of neoliberal creation of wealth for shareholders and not communities. So that is a slightly critical analysis. It's certainly moving in the right direction because you're guaranteeing prices for people, but perhaps it can be taken much further. Now, I do understand the need for local and state governments as duty bearers to provide facilities for storage and so on. But we need to find ways in which we can do this that are beyond the corporate benefit that is at the end of the line. So I'm being a little bit, I'm saying what you've done is good, but at the end of the day, I think that social and solidarity economy can do a lot more.
Right. Thank you, Lynn, for that another insightful comment to help us move on. Okay, so with that, can I move on to my next question? Is how do we, Judith, sorry, you've been working a lot with CSA and leading one of these, the international movement and networks in furthering this. What are some of the greatest challenges that you have faced in growing the CSA movement to bring a move away from these neoliberal arrangements that largely benefit the shareholder at the cost at the cost of the small producer? What lessons can be learned there, and what are the biggest challenges that would be helpful for us to understand as we try and develop different systems?
At the cost of the small-scale food producers and also the consumers.
And yes.
I think in terms of the work we've done and the challenges we've faced, the first is to show the producers that it can be profitable. And we've created a lot of tools for online learning to support.
Sinend yung forms, anak. Wala siya.
Some background noise. Judith, are you back on?
I'm here. I just stopped talking. I think we need to maybe close a microphone or two.
Yes, I'm just trying to find out who. Yes, there's some background noise from one of the participants with some background noise. If you could put that off, that'll be appreciated so that Judith can continue her thoughts.
So the first thing is to show that it can be profitable for small-scale food producers and to provide the necessary training and support and mentoring so that they can actually make a go of it. The second is also to support new entrants in terms of new food producers, because one of the challenges around the world is that farmers are an aging population. The average age today, I think, is 62. And what we're seeing in many countries, from China through France, through just about everywhere I know, is that there's a whole generation of new farmers who have totally different motivations. They're not necessarily people who own land or who come from traditional farming families, but who want to be the food producers and feed their local communities slightly differently than in the past. So working with them to create support technically in terms of training in agroecology, as Lynn has been doing. And it's always essential to realize that in agroecology, one of the 10 elements that has been recognized by FAO is solidarity economy. So the social dimensions of agroecology, as originally conceived by Michel Altieri in the States and various other fathers of the concept, is really, really important. This means building the community. So that is the second challenge, is working together to build community around the farms and with the eaters. Third challenge, I think, is for people to realize, for eaters to realize that there is a solution other than the supermarket. And the way towards that has been to build multi-producer community supported agriculture, or boxes, or whatever you want to call it, where you can have your chicken or your goat or your eggs or your cheese or your fruit or your vegetables, so that we have the one-stop shop approach that we've adapted. The next challenge that we have faced and that we are continuing to work on is how to be socially inclusive, to find a multitude of different mechanisms, from local government support through food stamps and so on, to be able to have a social mix and not just a yuppie, well-heeled community who can afford good health and good food. Today's society, this is one of the biggest challenges, is to overcome the poverty that is systemic, but that means system change. It means that we need to look much more to food as a commons.
Yes.
And that everybody has the right to eat well, not just the people who have a few more pennies in their pockets. And a lot of that goes through things like what was presented a few minutes ago, which is community gardens, so that people can grow their own food. Another challenge is to ensure we can preserve our traditional seeds.
Yes.
I don't know whether our friend Fräulein Guterres, whether the seeds that you are getting are genetically modified or whether they are traditional seeds. We need to preserve our traditional seeds for two separate reasons. First of all, they are open to being saved and replanted. And seed saving is part of the agroecology tradition. Secondly, they are, because by saving our own seeds, they adapt to changing climates. And thirdly, traditional seeds have a much higher nutritional content, but much higher. So that is another one of the big challenges we're facing, is to support the seed saving. And of course, to guarantee the access to land to be able to do all of this, and the access to water. If you like, the critical points in the whole food chain are access to land, seeds, and water. Those are the underpinning things. If you don't have land, you can't grow food. Or if you don't have sea, you can't fish your fish. Then there's the challenge of climate change. If you have pastoralists and the land has become arid and they can no longer move from their summer to their winter pastures and so on. I was working last week with people from Mongolia, where the climate change factors are critical. And all in all, these are the challenges. Some we can control, some we can improve on, and some are somewhat outside of our control. But the climate change, again, is something we can work on through agroforestry, through traditional food systems, bringing them back. You talked at the very beginning about logging and so on. I mean, that is how we create climate change. We don't just destroy people's livelihoods short term, we destroy them forever if we destroy our forests and our forest livelihoods. And it's the same story in Brazil as it is in Malaysia, you know. These are really critical things, and we need to fight back. We need to push back very, very hard by showing that we own our forests as commons and that we can work together at local level and then taking it beyond the local.
Thank you, Judith. Anyone would like to comment and add on to that? Oh, Judith, just before I open it to the floor, can I ask a question about the how does the CSA work? Because it's really an amazing growth. It's grown to 3 million people adopting it from Japan, China, US, and now Europe. How does it sustain itself? Because you have a partnership between producers and consumers in a neighborhood. Who bears the cost of coordinating distribution?
It varies. It really, there is no one size fits all contour all of this.
Can you share how you
the model is based on some principles, which is sharing the risks and the benefits.
Right.
You may end up 1 week because there's been a climate incident with very little.
Yes.
And during the peak harvest season, you may end up with a huge amount. So it does mean you need to be able to process your food or deep freeze it or whatever when the times are bountiful, and learn how to eat seasonally.
Right.
In terms of how it works is you sign up for a season. Now, that does not mean that you have to pay everything up front. Ideally, those who can do, but not everybody can. Usually you you sign a contract that is that you agree to stick with the system for a season. And you can pay then on a weekly or a monthly or a seasonal basis. That's very negotiable because you can't have one rule for all.
Right.
In terms of the different functions, because there's a newsletter function you can have, there's a coordination, it's all shared.
Okay. And
It's a collaborative system in most cases, but not all. In some cases, there is a small percentage, like 1 or 2%, that is part of the coordination. In some cases, the shares are delivered as home delivery. So they'd probably cost a bit more there. But generally speaking, in Europe anyway, there are different people every week who are responsible for overseeing the self-distribution. The producer arrives, lays out the food,
right.
and one of the CSA members will oversee that everybody takes, for example, 1 pumpkin, 4 tomatoes, a kilo of leeks, whatever, but it's on a rotational basis.
And voluntary?
Voluntary, absolutely voluntary, because it's a community-based logic that involves everybody being part of a participatory process. You cannot get rid of certain functions, but you can get rid of the profiteering. But very often it's all prepared on farm, in which case there is a slightly higher cost, not much.
Okay, yes.
But there are, in any CSA group, you'll have so many different people with so many different skills. For example, somebody with some IT skills can create a WhatsApp group.
Right.
Somebody else who really likes writing can help with a newsletter and recipes and things.
So Judith, sorry to interrupt. So it's the coordination is all done by volunteers of the neighborhood. I'm just wondering, so for very middle class and yuppie type of neighborhood, people have time and surpluses to do these sort of activity. But what about lower income groups? Have you seen how this works out, and are they able to sustain it even on a voluntary basis?
Generally, this is where you need somebody who will be there for oversight and support. For example, our member in New York, Just Food, really makes sure that the food is getting from outlying farms in the in the wider New York region, into really food deprived communities in the inner city. And they will be the support organization. This is where you need the extra 1 or 2% that will go into that oversight. And it isn't always 100% voluntary. So, depending, there's no one size fits all.
Okay.
Depending on whether you're looking at working with an inner city urban poor,
Right.
but you'd be surprised in urban poor communities how many people do have skills and do want to be a part of it and start to join in the distribution work. But then in places like Beijing, it's home delivery.
Okay. Okay.
But there is also a farmer's market where people can pick up.
Right. Okay.
So, there's absolutely no just one solution. It's got to be worked on locally to see what suits the local community and how you work and what is the most appropriate way to work within your local community to build the necessary empowerment and strengthen the community.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Very, very enlightening. Thanks.
And there's a question, do we charge anything for the training? We do not charge anyone anything for training. The training tools are free access on our site. There are going to be a lot more training tools. We've just hired new people to work on our training modules, but they're all there free. And in all of the funded projects we have where we create the training materials and carried out trainings, the trainings are always free.
Good. All right. Thank you, Judith. All right. So any more questions and comments? We are down to our last 15 minutes.
I'd like to react to the CSA model of
Yes, please, Lynn. Go ahead.
There are, in the Philippines, these are already existing CSA.
I know.
Agricultures and using the natural farming system. The JADAM training has been started. The JADAM movement has been started in the Philippines in the South by a Christian named Andre Lim, and he has been training individuals at the start. Training farmers with individual farms until we started training the Christians some time ago, very recently after COVID. But the direction this Christian group is taking now is to create community farms. Co-living spaces, in fact, is what we have in mind. It is in the piloting. It's where there is a plot already, several hectares of land in Tanay that has been donated for use by the group, and we are thinking of starting actually a community co-living space where the communities will have their homes. There's sort of a resettlement site, except that the communities will help each other put up the facilities, the houses, the training centers, and the farms. And the farms actually put up JADAM farms there, produce their own fertilizers and pesticides, produce their own food, produce their own medicine. And there's even going to be a health center there, a health facility, where people's nutrition can be, nutritional needs can be addressed, where even people with cancer and chronic diseases can come and live there for a time until they are fully recuperated. It's an integrated system in a way where the community we will train them how to do it, and they will be part of the, and it's going to be a social enterprise, not a cooperative, so that it will be more sustainable, so that there will be money to get going, and everybody gets a share in the profit. It's in the works now. We hope to get there sooner than soon, because I really believe that it is high time everybody starts doing it, especially the Christians.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. So, okay, can we have we probably have one space for one more person to make any comments or questions before we need to wrap up? Okay, if not, maybe I will give Judith, can you put your final closing comments in 2 minutes, and then I will wrap the whole thing up for everyone.
Okay. I can see that there's a question from Jay Sharma to me there in the chat. In terms of land, seeds, and water, I think that community management and community empowerment are really the answer to this. I think that what Lynn has said about community farms and holistic approaches, if we have community water management, and when I say that, I include the local authorities in the community, because we need local governance and governments, and I'm using both words, to be a part of the holistic system, because water management has got to include the local governments. In terms of seeds, local seed saving, in Asia, seed saving is very traditional. In India, for example, there are lots of very good examples there. And in terms of land, it is how we use our land for feeding our local communities. So how can community-supported agriculture and a variety of other similar approaches, because I think that the question of building sustainable local food systems must embrace diversity. Community-supported agriculture is probably the one that is at the top of the list in terms of linking food sovereignty, agroecology, and social solidarity economy. But there are a number of other very, very strong models. And I would include community farm as part of the community-supported agriculture logic. I think we need to take control of our food systems. We need to regain some control over our human rights. That includes the right to health, it includes the right to housing, it includes the right to education. And this needs to be community-led, but states need to, as duty bearers, ensure that we have our human rights. So we need to bring pressure to bear on our governments. We don't necessarily need a lot of financial support to start a community-supported agriculture group. I think the examples you've been giving here from the ground and the stories from the ground show what can be done by the community, but they need to be supported by local government and national government and recognized.
Okay, thank you. Wow, thank you. Managed to do it in 2 minutes. Amazing.
Well, you give me 2 minutes, I won't take 3.
Okay. No, but we've got a very patient group. We're down to the last 5 minutes. Okay, so sorry, Ben, do you have any words to say?
Okay, very short. In developing countries like the Philippines, you have a dichotomized setup of people where many people from the rural areas have migrated into the urban. So the phenomenon of urbanization is very marked in developing countries, such that the people living in the rural areas, they produce food for their own consumption and some surplus in order to access some other needs that for their households. So one of the things that really needed to be addressed is how do you create that market? Because when you produce, you have to sell in order to be sustainable. This is the big challenge, and in ASEC, we're trying to connect groups of consumers in urban centers and groups of producers in rural areas. And some are already connecting, like the one that was mentioned, a pastor in Metro Manila, my friend, he was convinced, so he started a consumer group, and now it's expanding, So they are now buying from groups of farmers. Also, HomeNet producers, they have started of Dr. Inday Freneo, they have started CSA, So these are the things that we need to really do, not only organize the producers, we also need to organize the consumers in urban areas because they have become accustomed to processed, over-processed food, which are cheaper, like noodles, canned goods. Yeah. So these are the things that are the challenges because they have been accustomed to this kind of lifestyle. It's very easy to buy, these canned goods and noodles instead of cooking vegetables. So these are the part of the challenges. How do you connect producers directly to consumers? And COVID-19 has partly provided a solution because even cooperatives, they have lost the institutional buyers, which are normally the big supermarkets. And so they were forced to go to communities, to establish satellite offices near the communities. And I've been hearing a lot of stories about cooperatives now directly putting up farmers market, they call it, near the communities, so that the produce of their farmer members can directly be delivered to the communities. So this is the new settings right now, and many of these, in fact, the largest family-oriented cooperative in the Philippines, having participate in our SSE online academy, realized that they have been missing this kind of approach. Yeah? So the approach of linking with rural producers, linking them to the urban consumers, is now being practiced by this very large association of farmers. So that is what is happening right now, and we're trying to tell our friends in the urban areas. There's so many women's groups in the Philippines. CSA in many other countries like Japan, Korea are started by women. But our women, are not starting there just in microfinance. But what is important is to connect the producers in the rural areas to the urban consumers, which we are. We are the consumers in the urban areas. So this is another aspect that we need to realize, that really there is a disconnect between people, poor, middle class in the urban areas, and the producers in the urban areas, and the producers in the rural areas. So that's only the thing that I'd like to add to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. All right. Okay. That's been very, very interactive and hearty discussion by all. Some excellent comments and questions that were put. I particularly enjoyed Judith's responses as well. So if I can just summarize, there is a need for a greater awareness of what is actually happening, both by the state as well as by the general public, recognizing that the people are being left behind as a result of the big players outsourcing their cost. Products are so much cheaper, and the small producers are not able to compete at the prices these big players are able to manipulate the market, enjoy the subsidies due to their influence, as well as control the markets and make that those barriers too high for the small farmer to enter. So it's creating greater awareness in that area, and also that the consumers themselves are losing out as a result of all this, that they are not able now having to buy processed food and non-nutritious food. So that's one way that we need to create better awareness. Now, the awareness is not just among the people, but also among the state, to understand that they are duty bearers to the people, and to ensure that they are able to enjoy these rights or commons, the commons and the rights to public goods as healthy food, nutritious food, and for farmers for their livelihoods, that they are able to sustain their lives and also their environment. And to do this, step number 2 is that of then it's necessary for the people to come together through their social movements, to come together and to build systems to confront an unjust system that is making life worse for everyone and slowly destroying our natural resources. And so these movements need to grow. It needs to be coordinated, and to build this alternative economy, and bringing back healthy food and producers that are able to sustain their lives. And so I think with that, we are at the end of it all. In terms of policy recommendation, I think one of the things I saw really helpful here, if state could develop local markets or neighborhood community stalls where producers then can come to bring their produce right into affordable markets. Right now, the entry into supermarkets is too high for any producer. They don't have the volume, they don't have the networks, and the cost of logistics to bring it from one small farmer to the supermarket is obviously not tenable. And so they need to be put into smaller groups and connecting them directly into neighborhood communities. So that's something that Philippines is doing very well. And Ben is talking of farmer markets. That is something that's emerging. I think that those are great. And perhaps for the ASEAN recommendation, that's one of the things that can be put in, that governments need to just do a little bit, creating a stall, a space, and connecting them to neighborhood communities to facilitate such markets. Secondly, I think on the bigger scale, state also have a duty for, particularly for farmers in the rural communities, which are small. They don't have the cost of transaction is very high because they don't have roads, or they don't have energy or electricity in these places. They don't have chiller rooms. So, and the cost of transport can be very, very high. And so these infrastructure, the state needs to begin to apportion their subsidy. Instead of all going to the big farms and subsidizing big farms, it has to go to the small farmer and small producer to make sure that this infrastructure is in place, and therefore cost or transaction costs becomes affordable and they can become profitable. Thirdly, I've also stated there needs to be digital access so that these communities can access markets without going through too many layers of middlemen. And fourthly, to develop industries for downstream processing. And the fifth point is that to facilitate trade networks and groupings of local industries to create an economy of scale to access international markets. So these are the recommendations. Anyone want to add on or to comment on it?
I think I'd like to add 2 things to that. One is that states need to recognize and subsidize or support agroecologically produced food, as opposed to putting the subsidies into industrial agriculture. The second recommendation I would like to make is something we haven't touched on, is that local authorities and states should create a legal framework for public procurement from small-scale agroecological farms, for public procurement for hospitals, for school meals, and so on. And that's low-hanging fruit.
Right. Yes. Yes.
It's a very good type of policy recommendation that can be taken up very easily. And there should be provision for public procurement for groups of small-scale agroecological food producers to get the food to the people who really need it the most. In other words, the children and those whose health is undermined.
Right. Yes. Excellent.
Onsin,
Yes, sir.
I think in the report, the point of Judith, that CSA is bottom-up approach must be emphasized. Because even if, you know, you seek the support of the government, you don't want the government to create a program, you know, and then take the initiative from the people. You know? So we have to really emphasize that this is a grassroots movement, you know, and the movement of the people is naturally connecting, you know, finding stakeholders in the system in order to make itself viable. You know? That should be the pathway, yeah, to a transformative and sustainable economy. Yeah, because if we provide the perspective that, hey, look, government, this is a nice initiative, why don't you support it? Maybe the government will create a program and take the initiative from the people, and that happens, you know, very, very, widespread in developing countries. Yeah, so we have to be very careful in our advocacy, emphasizing the fact that this is a people's, you know, initiative, and the linking to the government is just one strategy for strengthening this. You know, the role of the government is not to take the gun, you know, from the people, but to support this people's movement. I think that is important.
Yes. Very good. Thank you, Dr. Ben. A very, very important comment that underlines the whole of this recommendation. So with that, we thank you. Well, I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Judith, for coming in at a very early hour from France. And to all our participants.
Thank you indeed, Judith. Yeah, that was a big sacrifice in your part.
Thanks for asking me. It's been great.
Yeah, I hope we can continue to have you, Judith.
I feel incredibly honored to be part of your conversations.
Yes, thank you very much.
And thank you, Jay, for putting a really good policy pointer into the chat as well, just before we turn off, because people can take it from there.
Super.
Yeah.
All right then. So thank you, everybody. Great to see you all again.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Lovely being with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Chandra, I'll just take a photo of the comments, because we don't have a record of this.
Ay, ganun.
The chat is recorded. It is in the file.
It's in the file?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Because this is very important, you know.
Yeah.
The chat box.
Yes.
Normally we do not include that in our report, but it's very important. All the comments here, you know, the questions. Thank you, Chandra.
Okay. I will end
wonderful,
this.
Onsin, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, Onsin.
Congratulations. Very nice, you know, very nice.
It was very, I mean, Judith was amazing.
Amazing, yes.
Congratulations,
exactly,
Onsin.
you know.
Facilitate the
Thank
question.
you.
So we need more, you know, of Judith in our discussion. So Onsin, you read, you know, the guidelines up for the ASEC, Convergence Space, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Shigeru has already replied. He said he's looking forward to the questions. So we need to compile all the questions and see whether there are questions that are, you know, repeated, or can we, you know, reformulate them in such a way that they do not overlap with one another,
Okay.
the questions, you know.
Okay.
So that is in preparation for the November 6th.
Okay, November the 6th. All right.
November
Let me
6th.
get cracking on it.
Yeah. So you will have very limited time there on scene, you know.
Sure.
Maybe only I think about 20-25 minutes.
Okay.
And
That's
you
a
have
lot.
to include there your introduction and then the discussion and then answering the questions, you know. So you have to limit, you know, the comments, answers of the panelists as well as the participants to 2 minutes, 3 minutes to 3 minutes.
All right. All right.
And we will be, you know, putting Chandra to remind all the participants, putting up, you know, this, your 3 minutes is up. Because
Okay.
time really is very limited.
It
Time
is.
is very limited.
25 minutes. Okay. I will work
Yeah.
within that parameter.
Good. We really had a good discussion. I think this approach, you know, of introducing and then asking questions is really very stimulating and includes a lot of participation from the participants. You know.
Yeah.
We have almost 50% participation, you know.
Is that right? Oh,
Small
yeah.
group, and yet around
Yes.
7-8, you know, participated in the discussion.
Yes. Yeah, I wish we had more people. But okay, we'll
This is good. This is good, you know.
growing this.
Yeah, round table discussion with 15, 20 people is really good. It's like a focus group discussion.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
So the lessons learned, you know, are very, very clear and elaborated.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
So thank you very much.